Continuation of the anterior abdominal wall. The second muscle in the anterior abdominal wall is the internal oblique muscle, forming the second layers of the muscle of the anterior abdominal wall. It takes origin from intermediate area of the iliac crest, from the upper concave surface of the inguinal ligament, and from the lumbar fascia. It is inserted lower 6 ribs and in the linea alba. The fibers directed upwards, forwards, and medially to end by aponeurosis. This figure showing the internal oblique muscle directed upwards, forwards, and medially, and ends by aponeurosis to be decussate with the opposite side to form and sharing the formation of the linea alba in the middle line. Transversus abdominis muscle takes origin from inner surface of the lower 6 ribs, from lumbar fascia which attach it to the lumbar vertebrae, from the inner lip of the iliac crest and the upper concave surface of the inguinal ligament. Its fibers inserted directed horizontally to end in the aponeurosis also to share in the formation of the linea alba and attach it to the lower fibers of aponeurosis united with that of the internal oblique to form the conjoint tendon, which descends to be attached to the pubic crest and the pectineal line, forming a part of the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. And this figure showing here, this is a transversus abdominis muscle, ends medially by aponeurosis, and the lower fibers with the fibers of the internal oblique share in the formation of the conjoint tendon. Rectus abdominis muscle, it lies longitudinal and rectus sheath, one on each side of the linea alba. Its lateral border marked on the skin by curved groove called the linea similionaris. Takes origin from the pubic crest and inserted into the void process of the sternum and the costal cartilage number 5th, 6th, and 7th. The muscle is divided by 3 tendinous intersections into 4 segments, which indicate the segmental development from several myotomes. The tendinous intersections of the rectus abdominis muscles are attached to the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, but separated from the posterior wall due to passage of superior and the inferior epigastric vessels. The tendinous intersections lies at the following levels. Number 1, one opposite the void process. Second, opposite the umbilicus. The third, at midpoint between the void process and umbilicus. This figure showing the rectus abdominis here inside the rectus sheath, subdivided by tendinous intersections here, attached to the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, but separated from the posterior wall. The rectus sheath at the lower part, the anterior wall is formed by aponeurosis of the external oblique and the conjoint tendon. The posterior wall has no aponeurosis but only formed by fascia transversalis. At the upper part, the anterior wall is formed also by external oblique muscle only, and there is no posterior wall, as the rectus abdominis muscle lies directly in the costal cartilage 5th, 6th, and 7th ribs. At the middle part, the aponeurosis of the internal oblique is split into 2 laminae, anterior and posterior lamellae, that include the rectus abdominis muscle. The anterior lamella fused with the external oblique, while the posterior lamella is fused with the transversus abdominis muscle. That is to say, the anterior wall is formed by 1.5 muscle, and the posterior wall also formed by 1.5 muscles. The contents of the rectus sheath are mentioned as muscular, vascular, and nervous structures. The muscular are rectus abdominis muscle and the pyramidalis. The rectus, it is the main content of the rectus sheath. It is subdivided again by tendinous intersections into many segments, and these intersections are attached, as we mentioned before, to the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, but separated from the posterior wall to give a chance for passage of the superior and the inferior epigastric vessels. Pyramidalis is a small pyramidal shaped muscle which may be absent, arises from the pubic crest and inserted into the linea alba. The nerve supply from subcostal nerve. Superior epigastric artery The third contents one of the two terminals of the internal mammary or internal thoracic artery which enters the upper part of the rectus sheath. Inferior epigastric artery arises as a branch from the external iliac, then nerves lower 5 intercostal and subcostal in addition to lymphatic vessels. This is the contents here is rectus sheath containing a rectus abdominis muscle. Between the muscle and the posterior wall of the rectus sheath, there is inferior epigastric artery, and this is the superior epigastric artery in addition to other structures. Inguinal triangle or Hasselbalch triangle, it is a triangular area found in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall, just lateral to the rectus abdominis muscle, and above the medial part of the inguinal ligament. Forms the posterior wall of the inguinal canal. Boundaries medially is the lateral border of the rectus abdominis muscle, but laterally inferior epigastric artery, and the base is formed by medial part of the inguinal ligament. This is Hasselbalch triangle or inguinal triangle. Lateral boundary by inferior epigastric vessels, medial boundary by lateral border of the rectus, and the base is formed by medial part of the inguinal ligament. Arterial supply of the anterior abdominal wall from different sources from the femoral artery gives the branches as superficial epigastric, superficial circumflex, and the superficial external pudendal. From the external iliac artery, inferior epigastric and deep circumflex iliac. From the internal mammary or internal thoracic, the two terminals of the internal mammary supply the anterior abdominal wall as superior epigastric artery and the musculophrenic. From the descending thoracic aorta, posterior intercostal arteries number 10th, 11th, and 12th. From the abdominal aorta, 4 lumbar arteries. The veins of the anterior abdominal wall dividing above the level of the umbilicus, the area is drained by lateral thoracic vein, which ends in the axillary vein. Below the umbilicus, this area is drained by superficial veins and in great saphenous vein, which directed to the femoral vein. But at the region of the umbilicus, there are two types of anastomosis: connection between tributaries of the lateral thoracic vein with superficial epigastric and inferior epigastric veins to form thoracoepigastric vein, which represents link between superior and inferior vena cava. Connection between paraumbilical veins and superficial veins of the anterior abdominal wall. The paraumbilical veins passes with the ligamentum teres through the falciform ligament of the liver to join the portal vein. This connection in the abdominal wall represents one site for portosystemic anastomosis. Now, about the nerve supply, the abdominal skin is supplied by 7 nerves, lower 6 thoracic nerves, and the first lumbar. They are arranged as 3 above the umbilicus, 3 below the umbilicus, number 10th for the region of the umbilicus. Above the umbilicus, 9th, 8th, and 7th. Below the umbilicus, 11th, 12th, and the first lumbar nerve. The skin at subcostal region, 7th thoracic nerve. The skin of the region of the umbilicus, 10th thoracic nerve. The skin above the symphysis pubis, iliohypogastric from first lumbar. The skin of external genitalia, ilioinguinal nerve from the first lumbar. And this is distribution of the cutaneous nerves to the skin of the anterior abdominal wall. This is the region of the umbilicus and the 3 above, 9, 8, 7. Then 3 below, 11th, 12th, and the first lumbar. Also external genitalia, first lumbar. The lymphatic drainage of the anterior abdominal wall, lymphatics above the umbilicus passes to axillary lymph nodes in this direction. The lymphatics below the umbilicus passes to superficial inguinal lymph nodes in this direction.